What's going on, everybody? This is going to be the weekly forecast for the week ahead. I know I'm live streaming it, so if you're watching live right now, it's cool. I'm not going to be answering any questions. I just want to do a live stream so that way it's a little bit easier. Overall, I don't want to clutter up the page today. I've already posted a lot in terms of the beginner course on my page. So if you guys haven't already, go check it out. I know most of you who watch me are already pretty intermediate to advanced, so it's not something that necessarily need to watch, but if you have a family member or friend who wants to get into trading, it's the reason why I made it. I made it for a close family member that is starting to get into trading, and I wanted to simplify it and get them off to the right steps. So let me know your guys' feedback on that course. I think it is a very simplified course compared to what's out there. And it starts from the very beginning, what is trading, and then it gets into the later portions of ICT itself. So let me see here, make sure everything's good. You guys can see the screen. At least can you put a 1 in the chat? Brian, I see you in the Discord. What's up, brother? I always appreciate you. I'm talking, right? I want to make sure my mic's on. I'm not just talking into nothing. Brian, what's up, brother? I hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope everything's good. Thank you again for reviewing everything for that course. That was a lot, man. It was difficult to get through all of that. It took me probably close to 2 months to get that done. But I'm happy with the production. I was able to get it finally done today. Awesome here. All right, well, let's get into the weekly forecast. I don't want to, clutter this live stream for those who are going to go back and watch it. So we have I believe a holiday tomorrow, which I don't have anything in my on Forex Factory. So we don't have any news event drivers. The first thing I'm going to start off with, I'm going to pull it over here just so you guys can see it. This is all my time, so make sure if you're watching this back in time or live, make sure this is all accorded to your time. But FOMC meeting minutes really doesn't mean much to me. It's really not that important. It's not. There's a difference between meeting minutes and the FOMC, actually the event. So make sure, if you're newer, make sure there's a huge distinguish between those two. I don't really find it that important. It doesn't do that much. The only really thing we have is Thursday, which we have 3 red folders. So it's kind of a low volatility week. It's going to be interesting. Doesn't mean that it's not high probability. There's still plenty of setups when there's no news event drivers. People that say only trade on news event drivers, I don't think it's bad advice, but there's plenty of days when there's no news event drivers and price is still moving. So you just have to pick and choose your shots. But that's it for the week as far as the weekly forecast if you're only trading USD correlated things. So let's get into Nasdaq. And you know what? I'm not even going to start out with Nasdaq. I did this last week and the week before. I don't really even start out with Nasdaq. And people are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I start out with everything else before Nasdaq, and then I go into Nasdaq. And I want to see how does everything else correlate with it, right? And something that's just been such a pain in my you-know-what is dollar index this year. I mean, if you look even from last year, man, we look at from 2023, January, we've been in this tight range. And it's been very difficult to, call a long-term move on dollar index. And if this thing did loosen up, it would make things a little bit easier for us. I believe it would make things, as an analyst, easier to see and read, which I believe as we get into later portions of this year, we're not going to be stuck in this range. Eventually, we are going to get some type of swing. But again, we're going to start out in the higher time frame. We're going to start on the monthly time frame. This is where everything originates from. So if we've been analyzing this, we've been inside between that discount fair value gap there, and then inside of this premium SIBI here. Now we have this residing on dollar index, which is interesting. We've stabbed up into it already, and I'm watching the time, right? I'm looking at, all right, we have 10 days left of the month, and it's a little bit difficult to obviously predict, but to me, if I was to look at the rest of this month, how would it play out? Just looking at the monthly time frame, I don't have enough information, obviously, but to me, I was calling higher prices on it, but things are just not lining up to where I want them to be on dollar index, so I may elect to believe we're going to see lower prices this week and going into the next couple weeks here. So that's our parent PD array, right? We've stabbed up to it. This is the parent. We go down into a weekly time frame, and we have this premium fair value gap with the premium order block here. So this up close candle there, we've stabbed up into it. Just a weird closure last week. I wanted a little bit more decisive closure in terms of whether we're going to close bullish higher or at least get a closure lower. And unfortunately, we didn't get that. So it's a little bit half and half. To me, it's 50-50 still. I'm not going to call something with pure confidence right now on dollar index. And most people, they hear that and they're like, what? You're not, you're supposed to know what you're supposed to be doing. But there's plenty of times when I don't know what price is doing, and you have to sit still and wait for more information. Let time do the work for you. For me, it's just not enough information. I could see this very well this week. I mean, we could easily overlap this previous wick here. We could also expand lower. So I need to wait for at least another day or two to get a clear determination. It may take another week, but as far as what I'm looking at, it could take probably tomorrow or a Tuesday, at least for me to get a clear bias. So again, there's that monthly SIBI, the weekly SIBI, the daily SIBI. So we've all reached up into it. We've taken out buy side liquidity here, there, and even this high here. So the fact that we've done that, we've taken out buy side multiple times, ran up into the monthly SIBI, weekly, and daily. To me, this inefficiency here, this to me, when I was paying attention to last week, I wanted this to support price in order to go higher. If I was going to look for higher prices over on dollar index, I preferably wanted that to hold price in order to go higher, in order for this to complete what I was looking at as a market maker buy model. But I'm just not getting that. There's just not enough evidence, and I'm not going to continuously be stubborn and push a bias that, to me, really is not coming into fruition. We have this inefficiency here, this up close candle. But again, I was mentioning last week, the only thing I really wanted to see visited was this inefficiency there. So if we close through this, we drop lower, and we have sell side here, and then we have relative equal lows resting down here, which do make me weary of pushing price higher, especially when we've gotten underneath. Now, currently where we're trading, I have to be careful with what I'm saying because things can change. Even though price is trading where it's at right now, we could very well tomorrow, by the time I get in New York, this thing could be moving higher. If we start moving lower by the time I come to New York and we're approaching these lows, I'm going to elect to believe we're going to run through this inefficiency here. We're probably going to run through this order block in there as well. That's what I would elect to believe. But if I see by tomorrow we start approaching higher prices, I may, again, switch back to what I was thinking, which was higher prices. You have to be able to move fluidly in the market. There's never things that are 100% certain. There's going to be times when you think that, even in a session, you think price is bearish or bullish, and then you have to immediately switch on a dime. And that is an experienced, well-known analyst where you're able to adjust very quickly with logical evidence. And again, you have to let time do the work for you. Right now, there's just not enough evidence, nor is the time right for me to really call something. So hopefully it makes sense. To me, it's 50-50 right now. If I see evidence by tomorrow, we're closing through this inefficiency, then I'm probably going to look for the sell side. If by tomorrow we're closing off higher, we're moving higher, then I'm going to look for the buy side here from Wednesday of last week and the open portions of this inefficiency to be filled in. So I'm not going to go any deeper into it. I mean, we can look at a 4-hour in here just to get a perspective. So look at these relative equal lows. That's really what concerns me, is if we start moving through, especially these relative equal lows, it would make me weary to want to keep calling higher prices. Because if we reach into this inefficiency, to me, when you have sell side like this, it's going to elect to probably gravitate towards the sell side, especially after digging into a monthly, a weekly, a daily SIBI. To me, it's going to trade through this, right? That would be the narrative. So these relative equal lows, if we start approaching them overnight, then we're probably going to trade through this inefficiency and the relative equal lows down here. That's what I would like to believe on dollar index. Now, how does that affect NQESYM? How does that affect us? Well, if dollar index starts to drop off lower heavily, then we have to stand on the idea that index futures are probably going to gravitate higher. It does the inverse correlation. It's the reason why I pay attention to it a lot, and I'm going to show in here as well. I always start out with this on the weekly forecast is I go over bonds, I go over yields, I go over dollar index, I go over a little bit of Forex just to get an overall feel of the market. What is it doing? What did last week close off like? Those type of things are very important. If I'm only looking at NQ, I'm looking at a very limited amount of information. It's a very skewed way to look at the market, in my opinion. It's something that I wish, I told my younger self, because if I was able to read intermarket relationships like I do now, man, I would have had such a shortcut in my trading. These things really do help. I know there's a huge push for, not looking at narrative, not looking at intermarket relationships, only doing, a 5-minute, 1-minute time frame entry patterns, but those will only get you so far. If you're like me, who's a maniac, and you want to know everything about these markets, you want to know every single inch of it, then to me, you have to utilize these things. It's what ICT, our mentors, taught us. It's not just coming from me. So looking at bonds, again, if I'm looking at the monthly time frame, we've traded off lower, which bonds, again, let me make this clear, dollar index is inverse correlated to index futures. So if dollar index is moving lower, index futures should be moving higher. Bonds move in sync with index futures. Again, they're oppositely correlated to dollar index. So if dollar index was moving lower, we would want to see bonds moving higher. Yields, you want to see yields in sync with dollar. So if dollar is moving higher, you want to see yields moving in sync with dollar. So hopefully those correlations, you don't get them mixed up. I know last week I may have done it a little bit too quickly for some people. Looking at last week on bonds, we had a lower closure in here. We have this inefficiency there. We could reach down into it, because if dollar index moves off lower, then I would be anticipating bonds to move higher alongside index futures. So I have to keep that in mind. Going over the 5-year note, again, there's nothing in here that would really push me to call a long bias in it. Even looking at the monthly, the weekly, the daily, we've closed off lower. So it's a little bit of a conflicting bias, because, again, if I see dollar index moving lower, I need to see bonds starting to move higher. And things can change. If dollar index started to move higher, then this would agree. Same here with the 10-year note. Again, I just briefly look over these. I just look at the higher time frames, and I look at the inefficiencies and the way we've been closing. I'm not going down to like a 15 5-minute chart. For me, there's no reason to do that. I'm not intraday trading it. Looking at yields, again, yields are in sync with dollar index, and they do oppositely correlated to index futures and bonds. Okay, so 30-year in here on the weekly time frame, we've closed off higher. We're inside of this inefficiency here, and if you look at the daily, right from the open, we stepped up into it. Again, there's just not enough information for me to really call any long-term bias, but we've moved off higher in the last several weeks in here. So if preferably, I would really want dollar index to move higher. That would be my preferred analysis on it, because that would make sense for bonds moving lower, yields moving higher, dollar moving higher, index futures moving lower. So lastly, I'm just going to check over EU. EU is inverse correlated to dollar index, and I can get a read. If dollar index is a little bit unclear, sometimes EU can give me a little bit better read. Even in here, I still see euro possibly dropping off lower, which would make dollar moving higher. Because this weekly time frame in here, we've disrespected all bullish PD arrays. We've moved up into this weekly premium balanced price range here. We've dropped off lower away from it. We're not respecting any bullish PD arrays. We're not inside of any. So there's no reason for price just to randomly expand higher. Looking at the daily time frame in here as well, we're inside of this reclaimed discount fair value gap. Now that doesn't mean that just because we're inside of that, we're going to expand higher. I mean, to me, we've disrespected this whole right side of the curve, and we're starting to shift in terms of market structure. So I'm keeping an eye on euro to get a little bit better read of dollar index. If I see euro moving off lower, then I would see dollar index moving higher. So I'm just keeping an eye on it. In terms of if you're trading Forex, I mean, this has been a terrible yearly open. I mean, there's no way I would have been able to trade any of this. I don't know why people keep asking me to trade Forex to cover it. I've traded it for the first 3 years of my career. Right now, this is not favorable at all. This is not something I would even touch remotely. Pound dollar, again, look at the daily time frame. This is terrible. This is awful. This is something you don't want to be a part of. And again, index futures may move into this at one point or another, so you have to be aware of this type of profile of like, okay, if I see this in dollar or index futures, I'm not trading it. There's no reason. So again, this is inverse correlated dollar index. If dollar moves off lower, then we have buy side above us, but again, there's 50-50 in here. I see sell side, I see buy side on pound dollar. So I can't really call a move. I mean, this is 50-50 to me. So again, there's nothing super clear to me on everything right now. Let's move into NQ now. Start on a monthly time frame. Just checking the chat real quick. Yes, I know there's a holiday tomorrow, so I'm not going to be trading or live stream tomorrow. But I just want to get the weekly forecast out there. Tokyo, good morning from South Africa. After a holiday, does it make it low probability to trade the morning session? Possibly. Again, every single profile or rule has some exceptions to the rule. It just depends on what price action. But I would advise do not trade tomorrow. There's no reason to. But Tuesday going into it could be a little bit lower probability. But again, the market could be opening up pretty wild because there's a held day out of the week and there's only 4 days left. So again, it's situational. Monthly time frame on index NQ. I'm using the continuous contract because I'm able to see old price in here. So I get questions over that. And I have the adjustment on because if you take it away, then the high is a little bit different. Looking at the monthly time frame and the monthly candle so far. Yeah, Brian, I agree. 10 days left. So I'm trying to visualize if I was to, let's just say, for instance, I was looking at lower prices the rest of the month. Can I visualize this really closing off lower? I could, but due to experience of time, do I really see that with 10 days left? Not really. Again, visualization and trying to predict is just kind of something I do for fun, but it's nothing concrete. Since we're at all-time highs, it's difficult for me to call anything super higher than what we've already printed. So the only thing I'd be looking at is the high from last week, which is the all-time high at 18,133 basically. Last week we closed off lower. Again, to me it's 50-50. I'm looking at this in here. I mean, at currently where we sit. I mean, I could see us trading off lower, possibly back at least into this inefficiency in here. I'm looking at the nearest discount inefficiency, and that's resting in here. So that's what I'm getting at, is that's the nearest thing I could look for. I'm not going to look for anything else besides that because that's the easiest place for me to look at. Buy side liquidity will be resting above here. Oops. So if we gravitate higher, then I'd be looking at last week's high for price to gravitate towards. It's just, to me, it's indecisive. I don't preferably know. With weekly forecasts, there's just too limited amount of information for me to make a decision. It's just me trying to make a decent read on what could happen this week. If you look at Friday, we closed off lower in here. So to me, either we're going to be inside of consolidation. It's kind of what I'm looking at in here, because we're basically in between this high and this low down here. So we're in between that. Just looking at everything, I mean, we're still in a bullish dealing range. So that's something I'm keeping in the back of my mind is monthly, weekly, and even the daily, we're still bullish. So I'm not trying to call a top in this market. The only way I'd be confident in that is if dollar index started to really gravitate higher. Again, it's inverse correlated. So if dollar index started to gravitate higher, then I'd be comfortable calling some type of quote-unquote top. So if you look at just simply dealing ranges, this dealing range low up to that high, that's what I was calling all last week, is we're still inside of this. So I can't call a top. I can't short this market when we're still basic market structure 101. Higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. So I'm paying attention to that. People overlook that, but it's basic market structure. And we're still inside of that bullish dealing range, so I can't call a top in this. We do have call this a bearish order block in here. With this closure off lower on Friday, it would make me hesitant to call any prices higher until I got more evidence of that. Looking at the 4-hour time frame, we bypassed this, but basically we returned into a premium. So that dealing range high down to this low, this is our bearish dealing range. I don't know why I have 75%. I think I was teaching something. We got above optimal trade entry. It was a really deep premium retracement. And to be honest, I was caught off guard on the drop lower on Friday. I was still able to adjust and catch a long on ES, but sometimes you're going to get caught off guard. That was not a part of my analysis going into Friday, and we dropped off lower. So we have some sell side. I mean, we did take it out on Tuesday with CPI here, but all of these are relatively equal down here, and this large inefficiency there. So we returned back to that on Tuesday. Wazy, what's up, brother? Hope you're doing well. It's just muddy. Yeah, it's indecisive to me. I mean, I could look at the gun to my head. If I had to, gun to my head, I would call lower prices. But we have some sell side here. Remaining portion, barely, at least on the 4 hour, there's a remaining portion of the fair value gap there. But we could return back into this reclaimed inefficiency. If we do that, then I would be looking at an overall probably shift on the higher time frame, probably shifting to lower prices. So again, if something's 50-50 to me and I can't call a certain side with confidence, especially if things are not agreeing with intermarket relationships, something's just conflicting, then I just sit still. I'm not going to push a certain narrative upon it. It's fine. Especially with the weekly forecasts. I mean, again, I reiterate this, it's limited amount of information. You see here on Friday, we retraced back up into the SIBI after that drop off lower. I was annotating for the live stream how this trend line phantom, and it's actually from this low, just from experience doing these things. But this trend line phantom was too clean. I mean, think about all quote unquote retail. A lot of sell side resting underneath all those lows. So I would elect to believe, at least for right now, going to my head, sell side would be ran here. And if that does happen, then I would probably be looking underneath that low. I wouldn't be looking at this as an order block. There's no reason for price to react off that to move higher. Again, you have to look at order flow and what it's doing. Just because there's a bullish PD array does not mean it's going to expand higher. Looking at 30-minute, again, SIBI in here, dropped off lower, 15-minute time frame, turned into a premium inefficiency there, then sold off. So just to annotate, this is our new week opening gap here, the lime green one. This is a previous new week opening gap there. So probably want to gravitate towards that to close it in. It's basically a volume imbalance right there. Is there any other ones beneath us? Let me see if I have 4 on. Typically I'll have 4. It looks like I had 3 on. Let me see where 4 is. Yeah, so there's one resting beneath here. Again, the way I use new week opening gaps, there's multiple uses for them. There really is. But if I'm just looking at in terms of bias, then I'm looking at it basically as a ladder system. Is, if we break underneath one, I'm going to look for the other one to be traded to. So if we trade to this current new week opening gap, then I'd look for this one. We break underneath this new week opening gap, the bias is still short, then I'd be looking for a price to trade into this old new week opening gap. So you can use it just basically as drawing liquidities for a bias, but there's multiple uses for them. I think that's really going to be it. I'm not going to overcomplicate it. There's, again, to me, it's not high probability right now. There's nothing that I would call with certain, and that's fine. That's perfectly okay as an analyst. That's actually a superpower. That's a great thing to know, is when you don't know what price is doing, to sit still, wait for more information. We have a limited amount of news event drivers this week, so you have to be aware of that as well. There may be days where we don't get a lot of movement, and you can't be super heavy on trying to push a bias or push a certain narrative on it, especially when you don't have volatility in the market. Things can go sideways. It's, as much as you want to push the market, it's not going to move. So you have to be aware of that. I think that's really going to be it. I mean, I'm not going to be live streaming tomorrow, for those who are aware. Bank holiday. So just take it as a day to chill out. And then we'll come back Tuesday and see what the market provides us. So until then, good luck and good trading, everybody.